Today, artists, we are learning how to draw 3D shapes that look so real, they look like you could almost pick them up off the page. We'll draw a cone, a cube, and a sphere. All right, before we get started, let's make sure that we have everything we need for this project. You need just a small piece of scratch paper for practicing. You're going to get a tan piece of construction paper. You'll need a ruler. At your table, there should be baskets of crayons, including white crayons. And then there should also be at your table some Post-it notes and some circle stencils. Go ahead and pause the video now if you don't have some of those items and get ready. First thing we're going to do is a little contest between the people at your table. What I would like for you to do is use your pencil to just draw a line, but here's the trick. I want to see who can have the lightest line that can still be seen. So, our policy for this project and most projects is draw light till you get it right. So there's my pencil line. You can barely see it, but it can be seen. Go ahead and practice drawing lightly with your pencil, but dark enough that you can still see it. Now that you're prepared to draw light, you are going to be putting that paper to the side and moving on to your tan paper. Now, I am not going to be using a pencil because I want to make sure that you can see what I'm doing. But you will be using a pencil and you will be drawing lightly so that we can erase if needed. The first thing that we want to do with our tan paper is divide it into 3 sections, 3 equal sections. It does not have to be an exact measurement though, so I would just try to eyeball it. Let's see. I would have a middle section and then 2 sections off to the side. So I'm going to draw just a little tiny dashes to show me I have my left side, my middle side, my right side. We are going to start by tracing a square in our middle section, basically right in the center of your page. But you do want your square to be just over just a little ways to the right because we will be turning this into a 3D object, 3-dimensional, a cube. So we want some room to grow. So I'm just tracing my square. There we go. If there's some extra lines, the corners need to be matched up. You can do that. All right. Next up, we are going to turn this into a cube. So first what we're going to do is you're going to take from the very top left corner, you're going to bring your ruler at a diagonal line, kind of like a slide, and you are going to draw a line up just about an inch. Okay, we want to keep that exact same angle, so don't change the angle, but try to keep it about the same and move on to the next corner. Okay, and then we're going to go to the bottom right corner. Again, try to keep that angle as similar to the other ones as you can. And then the last step is that we're going to connect these. Now, for this part, it's important that we have parallel lines with our existing square lines. So think of parallel lines kind of like a railroad track. Okay, we shouldn't have railroad tracks going in 2 different directions or pointing in. They should be perfectly lined up together. So we're going to draw a line straight across, okay, to connect. And then this parallel line on the side that's connecting our two diagonals, this one should be parallel with this vertical line from our square. Now, since you guys are using a pencil, if any of your lines were a little too long, you can kind of erase those, tidy it up a bit before we move on. Our next section, we're just going to trace around our circle. Later, we will be changing this from a flat shape to a three-dimensional shape using shading. So eventually this will become a sphere. The last shape that we're going to make is going to be a cone. You are going to start, we're in this first section here now, we're going to start by just doing 3 dots that will form the top of our triangle. Now, connect those dots with the ruler, so make sure that that ruler, you can still see both of your dots, and glide across so we have a nice straight line. And we're gonna go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Make sure you can see both of your dots. Some of us may have made a wider triangle. Some of us may have made a thinner triangle. It's up to you. Now, instead of going straight across and using the ruler, we are actually going to be freehanding this, and we're just going to make a little curve. So if you want to use kind of a ghost finger and test that out before you draw, you can. And remember, just draw light till you get it right. Okay, so there's the beginning of our cone. Now we're going to make a horizon line so that it doesn't look like our objects are floating. They're actually going to be sitting on a table. You can just simply put your ruler straight across the middle of your shapes and then draw a line in between all of those shapes. Make sure to keep your ruler nice and steady during this, and don't draw inside of your shapes. Before we move on to shading, we are going to do a little bit of practice on our scratch paper. So I have a blue crayon here, and what I want to test out, and I'm just going to draw myself some boxes. They do not have to be perfect. You can be doing this with your pencil. This is just practice. No one's going to see this. So I drew 5 boxes here, 5 squares. The first one, I'm going to color as lightly as possible with my blue crayon. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on the crayon because I want this to turn out really light. You can probably barely see that I've even colored it. The next box, I'm going to press just a little bit harder, and I want to get the next shade up. So this one's going to be a little bit darker, a little easier to see. Don't press too hard because remember, we're filling 5 boxes. So you want to be able to see the gradient. You want to be able to see the difference. Okay, I'm sure you figured out by now we're pressing a little bit harder each time. Each square should get a little bit darker. This one's a little darker. Okay. My 4th box is a little darker still. And then the last box, this should be your darkest section. And you're going to be putting a lot more pressure on your crayon. There should be very little white spaces seen. That should be your darkest. So go ahead and practice going from light to dark, because that will be very important that you know how to control the color in your crayon before we start shading. Now that we've practiced our shading, we're going to go ahead and color in each one of our forms or our three-dimensional shapes. The first part that I'd like you to color is the front of your cube. So the part that's facing us, the part that we traced, that square, we're going to color this, and this should be your darkest coloring. So you're going to try to match that very last box from your gradient scale. Now we're going to move to the top of our cube, and this part should be more of a medium color. So we're going to be using less pressure on our crayon. We still want to be able to see the color, but it should not be as dark a shade as what you did on the front of the cube. The last part of our cube, we're actually going to use the white crayon. This is going to be the lightest part. This is part of the reason we use tan paper, is we want to pretend like there's a light source that is coming in and bouncing off this side of our picture. So that light from a lamp or the sun or whatever it may be is actually making this side a lot lighter. Now we're going to move on to our circle, which will become a sphere with our shading. So the darkest section is going to be throughout this area, okay? The lighter section will be more on this side of the sphere. So we're going to start with our darkest shade. And as we get closer to the middle, we're going to be using less pressure with our crayon so that we get a lighter shade. Keep in mind kind of this crescent shape, like a moon shape when you're coloring. And last, we're going to move on to shading our cone. So again, the darkest part, the shadow, is going to stay on the right side, just as it is in our other 3D shapes. So you can kind of start with a line so that you know, okay, this side is going to be the darkest. And then another line going down the side with your white crayon, and you know everything on this side is going to be that highlight, or where the light is hitting the object. So I'm actually going to start with the white this time. And then slowly, the middle section is going to be kind of just that very light coloring with your hue, whatever color you chose. But as you get closer to the right side, your coloring should become a little darker. And there you have it, our three-dimensional shapes.